Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to your meeting tonight. About 3 years ago, my research colleague and I attended a very moving ceremony at Phillipsburg Manor, which is where I've been an educator for the past 20 years, talking about the history of slavery right here in our area. And it was a commemoration of the enslaved people who were owned by the Phillips family. And there were these beautiful brass nameplates that were being lowered into the ground with a very moving ceremony and singing and gospel. And I thought, I've been telling the story about slavery at Phillipsburg Manor for 20 years. Why aren't there enslaved people who were working the farms in Irvington? Well, there were. We did this research and we found that the 6 major farms, which is pretty much every name going up and down Main Street. We've got Dutcher and Buckout and Acker and Ferris. These were the names of the families that owned these tenant farms right here in what is now Irvington. And so it wasn't that difficult for my colleague and I, Kathy, to go and do the deep research about, well, who were the enslaved people that were owned by these families. And all we had to do was go to the wills, go to inventories, these sort of documents, manumission documents, and sure enough, we came up with the names of 14 enslaved men, women, and children, mostly from sort of the late 1600s to about 1799. And then there's this gradual manumission process. And by that time, there were no more enslaved people in Irvington by 1820. So we also, at the same time, were getting to know this amazing artist in Yonkers. Her name is Vinnie Bagwell. And she's creating 5 life-size statues of enslaved people who were owned by the Phillips family down in Yonkers. It's a huge family. And those are just about done, and they're going to be installed right along the Yonkers waterfront. So my friend and I visited Vinnie many times, actually, in her studio. And we got to know her, and we started talking about ways that we in Irvington could commemorate, not with the $1 million price tag that Yonkers was paying, but something that a small village like Irvington sort of make this a model of how villages can commemorate their history, their full history. And so we started working with Vinnie, coming up with ideas, and we came up with the idea of a marble slab, basically, with a 2-inch bas-relief bronze statue that would be adhered to this. And she has this beautiful design of an enslaved child, because it's going to be placed right in front of the Main Street School on Main Street here. We had a difficult time with the village trustees. We made several presentations, and they thought, no, Irvington is really not known necessarily for being a town with slavery in their history. They were more interested in celebrating perhaps a more founding fathers kind of history. So in that case, we decided, well, let's just go straight to the school board. And the school board embraced our proposal with open arms. They're working very closely now with a group to really tackle racism in the school system, but also to celebrate all kinds of history. So the timing was just perfect. And we've been fundraising. I'm happy to say we just got a $7,000 grant from the county, Mary Jane Shimsky. So we're thrilled with that. The whole project is going to be about $40,000, and we have now about $7,000 to go. So including the $7,000 that we're getting from the county. So
where will it be placed?
It will be, so you know where Rip Van Winkle is by any chance? It's on the western side, so Main Street School, and if you just kind of come down the hill, there's a big stone wall right there. So there's Rip Van Winkle. So just between Rip Van Winkle and the terminus, the western terminus of this big stone wall, there's a plot of land there. So it's a little overgrown, a little wild right now. It was a gift by the Irvington Garden Club 20 years ago. There's a little plaque there. So I've been in touch with the garden club. I said, hey, now it's no longer an alien landing pad. Let's get this fixed up. And so we're working with them now to get some beautiful plantings in there.
There's more to the project, educational programs.
Yes, yes. So we will be working with the high school very closely. We're going, one of the people on Commemorate is actually the chair, if you will, of the Diversity and Inclusion Club. So it's a very big active club up at the high school. It's part of the PTSA. And they get funding for creating programs that would encourage high school kids to become what we're going to call ambassadors. So we're going to train them to give tours of the various sites. One of the things we also discovered is that Irvington has an enslaved African burial ground. So one of the families, Buckout, right? Buckout lived right where sort of the Eileen Fisher Renew store is now. His house was moved over to across Buckout Street and up on a little knoll. The house still stands there. But at about the time that Ardsley, let's say it's not Ardsley Park, but the little community that's right in there, what is that called? Anyway, it'll come to me. When these houses were being developed, Barney Park, Barney Park, in the mid-20s, that's when they were discovering that there were lots of enslaved African skeletal remains. And back in the 20s, nobody really cared too much about it. There was like jokes about it, the bones were tossed over their shoulders. There was no kind of commemoration. And so when we read all of these articles in the old newspapers, the Enterprise, we saw that, oh, okay, so we should think about having the village commemorate this burial ground as well. So the village, on our suggestion, pulled together a committee, and they are going to be making a beautiful little garden with some stone benches and some signage. Unfortunately, completely washed away in this last storm. If you drive down Buckout Street, you'll see these massive boulders were upended, trees were upended. So a lot of work will have to be done to sort of stabilize that. So the education component is that we're going to be working with the high school kids to be ambassadors, to learn how to give tours, public tours, school tours to all of these areas, and really become very proficient in the actual history of the enslaved Africans that were here in that time period. And we're also consulting now with the 4th and 5th grade school, which is what we call the Main Street School, to revamp their Colonial Day. So there's a whole new thinking about how Colonial Day, I know we all love Colonial Day, but enough with the dipping the candles. There really is a big story that needs to go around that. So we've been working, I think we've had 10 meetings now with the principal and with the faculty there to revamp that. And they will be using our very research in teaching very specific history about what was actually happening right here in our boundaries. So we've been very active and we'll be continuing with that.
You know, we have a club that Rotaract at the at Mercy College, and some of those students might be interested in learning about this and participating in some way.
Oh, that would be marvelous, because that's really the end. The Requa family was one of the families that actually enslaved 9 individuals, which was a high number, and it was right about where Mercy College is, and I would love to involve them. Yeah.